There's no way I'm spending another day here. Either you set me free or I'll come for your family." These were a couple of the words of the Crook in a desperate attempt to get out of jail. Nayib Bukele. But what was the president's response? Stay until the end of the video and discover the operation to capture one of the most wanted leaders of organized crime, known as Crook. It was an arduous task that required months of investigation and cooperation between different security agencies. The operation not only sought to bring to justice an individual accused of his participation in multiple criminal acts, but also to demonstrate the government's commitment to peace and citizen security. It all began with a series of citizen complaints that alerted them to illegal activities in a neighborhood that had been taken over by the gang led by Crook. The neighbors, tired of living in constant fear, decided to collaborate with the gang. The authorities provided information about the movements of the suspect and his accomplices. This act of courage became the starting point for the development of a strategic plan that respected both the rights of those involved and the safety of the community. Security forces established a discreet surveillance perimeter around the areas identified as possible hideouts for the suspect. They used advanced technological tools such as drones and facial recognition systems to collect evidence and confirm the presence of the Crook on one of the properties under investigation. Teamwork between local police, federal forces, and a specialized negotiation group was crucial in coordinating every step of the operation. The day of the operation was strategically chosen to minimize risks in the early hours of the morning, when the streets were deserted and criminal activity was lower. Special units mobilized toward the location identified as the leader's hideout. Gang member. Clearly, the strategy was to avoid a direct confrontation and seek a peaceful resolution that would guarantee the safety of everyone present, including the suspects. Authorities discreetly surrounded the house, ensuring that there were no possible escape routes. Through a loudspeaker, one of the negotiators addressed the occupants, requesting their surrender. The priority was to avoid violence and protect the lives of those responsible for criminal acts. For several hours, the negotiations took place, but the tension was palpable from inside the house. Some people tried to resist, but law enforcement remained firm in their professional approach. Finally, after a long verbal exchange, the occupants began to leave one by one with their hands raised, indicating their surrender. The Crook, who until the last moment had maintained a defiant attitude, was the last to leave the house. The capture was carried out without a single shot, proving that the professionalism and preparation of law enforcement can prevail. Even in highly complex situations, from the moment the Crook was handcuffed and taken to prison, he knew his life was about to change drastically. He had faced many things on the street, shootings, and the treacherous loyalty of his own. But this was different. Now he was alone, surrounded by concrete walls and barbed wire, far from the alleys where he ruled with an iron fist. The transfer to the prison was silent. The guards barely spoke to him, but their looks spoke volumes: contempt, satisfaction, and perhaps a hint of warning. "You have no power here," they seemed to tell him. When the metal doors closed behind him, a chill ran down his spine. It was a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. Fear. The first day was the most for a long time. They locked him in a small cell barely lit by a flickering bulb. The mattress was thin and smelled damp. The walls were covered with inscriptions made by others who had passed through there before him. Phrases of despair, forgotten names, dates without context. "No one gets out alive," read an inscription he couldn't help but read repeatedly at night. The noises from the prison were incessant. Inmates shouting, metallic blows in the distance, harsh laughter that seemed to mock the silence. He tried to sleep, but every time he closed his eyes, the faces of those he had betrayed or eliminated returned to haunt him. He writhed on the mattress in a cold sweat, until the first light of dawn filtered through the bars of his cell. The guard were quick to show him his position in this new hierarchy. For them, he was nothing more than a number, a criminal who had finally fallen. At first, the mockery was subtle, like dropping his food tray in front of him, or ignore his questions, but quickly the provocations became more direct. One of the guards, a burly man, with scarred knuckles, leaned toward him as he handed him His breakfast. You know what we do to guys like you? Here he said with a smile that wasn't kind. We'll show you what real hell is. The croc gritted his teeth and didn't respond. He knew that showing weakness would be his downfall. But the threat hung in the air, like an invisible knife that could fall at any moment. On the second day, he began what he would call his trial by fire during lunch. The guards separated him from the rest of the inmates and took him to an interrogation room. There were no cameras or records. It was just him and two uniformed men who closed the door behind him. Yes, how many more are out there? One of them asked while slamming the table with the palm of his hand. We know you have contacts, names. Talk. But the croc refused to cooperate. He remained silent, staring at the floor. It didn't matter. No matter how much they insisted, he wouldn't betray what little of his code, his loyalty to himself, he had left. The frustrated guards decided to teach him a lesson. They pushed him against the wall and punched him in the stomach, in the ribs, in the legs, never in the face, not wanting to leave any visible marks. When they finally left him on the ground, panting and in pain, one of them leaned over him and whispered, "This is just the beginning." The next few days were a whirlwind of pain and humiliation. Every time he passed through the corridor, the guards shoved him or threw sarcastic comments at him. "Where's your gang now, boss?" they said with a mocking smile. They even assigned him the most degrading tasks in the prison, such as cleaning the bathrooms or collecting trash in the yard. One night, while he was in his cell, he heard other inmates muttering his name. He couldn't make out what they were saying, but he knew they were judging him, analyzing. For some, he was a threat, to others, an opportunity. No one came to prison without enemies, especially someone with his reputation. What hurt him most wasn't the hunger or the beatings, but the feeling that he was losing his life. Outside, he had been someone. Here, he was nothing more than another number in a system that seemed designed to break people. He wondered if this was what he deserved, if this was the fate he had always had in store for him. One afternoon, while cleaning the yard under the watchful eye of the guards, a ray of sunlight hit his face for a moment. He closed his eyes and remembered his life before all this. The days when he was a carefree teenager, the moments when he could still have chosen a different path. But those memories were bitter because he knew he could never go back. That night, as he lay back in his cell, he heard one of the guards whisper something to another. "How long do you think he'll last?" one asked. "Not long," he replied, the other with a dry laugh. "Guys like him always end up breaking their crock." He clenched his fists and looked at the ceiling. He knew they wanted to see him fall, that they were waiting for the moment. Well, he would give in, cry, beg, but he also knew that if he did, it would be the end of what little remained of him. The buzzing of the phones in Nayib Bukele's presidential office was constant, a habitual cacophony at the epicenter of power in El Salvador. However, that no one call in particular broke with the everyday. On the other end of the line, a deep voice, filled with contempt and threat, spoke. From the depths of a dark cell, President Bukele said in a mocking and icy tone, "I am the croc, the same one you locked up. I want to speak directly with you. Don't send any secretary or your security dogs." The president, who was reviewing documents in his private office, was informed of the call. At first, he thought it was a joke or even a desperate attempt at manipulation, but he agreed to answer it. He wanted to hear what that infamous gang member had to say, aware that any word coming out of his mouth would be an attempt at intimidation. "Here I am, Croc," Bukele said. Calmly, he took the phone. "I'm surprised they allowed you to use a phone, but go ahead. Say what you have to say." The Croc's laughter echoed on the other end of the line. It was a sardonic laugh filled with a false sense of security that tried to camouflage his desperation. "They allowed me to use it because no one controls these prisons." "How do you think, President?" he replied arrogantly. "If you think you have absolute power, you're more blind than I imagined." Buell, imperturbable, let the gang member continue. He was used to attempts to provoke and destabilize. But he knew that behind the loud words, there was something else. "I would have called him just to exchange insults. What do you want?" Bukele asked with a cold and direct tone. "It's simple. I want you to get me out of here." The Croc responded with a certainty that couldn't hide his urgency. "I don't have Time for your games, Bukele. If you don't, do what I tell you, or I promise you he'll regret it. I know things. I know about your movements, about your plans. I can make everything collapse. The silence that followed those words, Beale took a deep breath before answering, weighing each word. Do you really think you can threaten me? He said with a calmness that contrasted with the intensity of the call. You're talking from a Zelda in a maximum security prison. Everything you think you have, your power, your connections, all of that was left out. When they arrested you, what makes you think you can intimidate me? The Croc's voice changed its initial tone, giving way to a more sinister, more calculating tone. Don't underestimate what I'm capable of. Bukele, the people out there still fear me. My men are active, and if I give the order, they will act. I don't care how much you think you've cleaned up the streets. This isn't just about me. This is a movement, and if you don't cooperate, you and your family will pay the consequences. The mention of his family made Book clench his fist, but his voice remained unwavering. Listen carefully, Crook. He responded, revealing a mixture of contempt and firmness. I locked you up because you were a threat to this country, and there you will stay. You think you can manipulate me with threats? You're more lost than I thought. I'm not the kind of leader who gives in to criminals. The only thing you'll achieve with this call is hasten your downfall. Crook, irritated by Bukele's lack of reaction, raised his voice. You're Beale. I'm not someone you can play with. I'm not one of those weak politicians that you can crush in your speeches. I gave you a chance to resolve this in a simple way. Now you'll see what it means to challenge me. Are your threats over? Bukele asked sarcastically. Because honestly, I don't have time to listen to someone who's no longer in control of anything. Before Crook could respond, Beale added with an icy tone, and if your men try anything, if they even think of moving a finger, I promise you there won't be a corner in this country where you and your gang can hide. You and your gang have destroyed enough lives. Now it's our turn to finish you off. With one swift move, the ship cut the call, leaving a furious Crook pounding on the other end of the line against the walls of its cell. The echo of his frustration was lost in the prison, where the guards watched without intervening, aware that the man who used to inspire terror was now reduced to just another prisoner. Bukele, for his part, summoned his security team and the top brass of the police. He reported the call and gave clear instructions to reinforce surveillance in the prisons, to intensify operations against the gangs, and to ensure that the Crook had no further opportunities to communicate with the outside world. He also made it clear that any attempt at retaliation would be met with the full force of the state. In a press conference called hours later, Bukele addressed the Salvadoran people without mentioning the details of the call. He left a resounding message. I want you to know that there is no criminal, no gang member, no threat that will make us back down. El Salvador is changing, and we will not allow fear to rule our streets again. Those who attempt to challenge the state will face justice without exceptions and without respite. The reaction of citizens was mixed. Some saw him as a brave leader willing to confront the darkest threats. Others criticized his approach, arguing that extreme measures could unleash an even greater wave of violence. But what no one could deny was that Bukele had made it clear that his commitment to the country's security knew no bounds. In the following days, operations against gangs intensified. Several cells were dismantled, and more than 100 members were killed. Meanwhile, the Crook remained locked away, facing increasing isolation. The call he had made in his desperate attempt to regain control became a reminder that the gang's days as untouchable forces in El Salvador were numbered. In the bustle of the presidential palace in San Salvador, the flashing lights of cameras and the murmur of reporters created a tense and expectant atmosphere. Local and international media had gathered to cover an urgent press conference called by President Nayib Bukele. The news of the capture of the infamous gang member known as El Crook had resonated throughout the region, and many expected firm statements from the president. However, what happened that morning exceeded all expectations. Bukele entered the room with his characteristic confidence. He dressed soberly, wearing a tight-fitting cap and a dark jacket. Contrasted with the glare of the flashes, he greeted, briefly, making it clear that he was not there to entertain or dilute the message he was about to deliver. In front of him, on the lectern, was an object that caught everyone's attention, a letter, folded carefully and supported with a clipboard. The rumors that the president had something forceful to say grew even more. "Good morning," he began in a firm but calm voice, looking at those present with a mixture of defiance and determination. "As everyone knows, my government has declared war on gangs and organized crime. It is not a symbolic war. It is not a play on words. It is a real fight that involves difficult decisions and decisive actions. We have captured thousands of criminals who for years sowed fear and chaos in our country. But I'm not here to talk about statistics. I am here to talk about something that essentially represents the nature of the enemy we face." He paused, taking the letter in his hands. The silence in the room was absolute, each journalist expectant of what Bukele was about to reveal. This letter continued, holding it up for all to see. It was written by one of the most notorious criminals. Infamous that. "We recently captured the Crook. This man, known for his atrocious act, has gone from leading a gang that terrorized our communities to being just another prisoner locked within the same walls they used to avoid. But even from his cell, in his desperation, he had the audacity to write me this letter. And do you know what it says here?" asked his voice, rising with indignation. "He threatens me, demands me. Does he dare to ask me to free him, to take him out of the prison where he belongs?" Murmurs began to spread among the reporters. Bukele unfolded the letter and read excerpts aloud with a sarcastic tone and a wry smile on his lips. "I'm giving him a chance. Bukele says, here's a chance. This man believes he has any right to negotiate with me. He says that if I free him, he won't cause more problems, that if I ignore him, I'll regret it. Incredible," he exclaimed, casting a look full of hatred toward the cameras. "This man who has caused so much pain thinks he still has power, but make no mistake, his time is up." For all of them, applause began to erupt among some of those present as they frantically took notes. Bukele held up the letter once again. "This letter is not just a symbol of the arrogance of the criminals we have faced. It is a reminder of why we cannot give in, why we cannot let our guard down. Some think they can threaten, manipulate, and negotiate. But let me be clear. In this government, there is no room for negotiation with gang members. There will be no mercy. There will be no truces. And to make it even clearer what I think of this opportunity offered to me, with a decisive move, Bukele took the letter and tore it up in front of everyone. The sound of the paper tearing echoed in the microphone. The camera flashes illuminated the gesture, capturing the moment with intensity. Not satisfied with just tearing it up, he threw the pieces to the ground and stomped on them, symbolically sealing his stance. "Just as I destroyed this letter," he said, in an implacable voice, "I will destroy any attempt by the gangs to intimidate them or double-guard them. Just as we capture the Crook, we will go after each and every one of those who are still outside, no matter where they hide, no matter how long it takes. This country will no longer be their territory." The room erupted with questions, but Bukele raised a hand to silence the reporters. His expression remained stern, but his tone took on a more hopeful note. "This is not just about justice. It is about returning to El Salvador what belongs to him: peace, tranquility, dignity. For too long we have lived in fear, allowing a few to control our streets and our lives. But those days are over. This government will not rest until every citizen can walk freely through their country. Fear of being extorted, attacked, or killed." The conference concluded with Bukele reaffirming his commitment to continue the security policies that had led to the capture of thousands of gang members. As he left the hall, reporters discussed among themselves, aware that this gesture, the destruction of the letter in front of the cameras, was more than a simple act or a declaration of war, a sign that Bukele was not willing to back down even an inch in his fight against crime. In the days that followed, the video of the conference went viral. Images of Bukele tearing up the letter circulated on social media and newscasts, generating a wave of opinions. Some hailed him as a determined and courageous leader, while others questioned whether his stance was too inflexible. But what no one could deny was the impact the message had had. It had reached not only the citizens of El Salvador, but also the people themselves. Gang members, who were still operating in the shadows in there. Zelda the Croc received the news of what had happened. One of the guards, with a mocking smile, told her how Book had torn up his letter in front of the entire country for the Croc. That was like a direct blow to the stomach. He had bet everything on that message, on that threat, and now he realized that he hadn't achieved anything. His pride, his confidence, everything was crumbling. For the first time, he felt the real weight of his defeat. And so we come to the end of this video. If you liked it, I invite you to give us a like so we can continue making more videos like this. Also, don't forget to subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any of our new videos. I wish you a great day. Until next time.